Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to our program today, where we continue our Superpower series. Today is Superpower number 4, Satisfaction. With a speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. There are on 14 members on Zoom and several members on Facebook. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thanks so much, JM. Really happy to be back here. Only, how can you claim that satisfaction is a superpower? It seems superpower means you should be able to break a building or melt something with your vision. It's such a soft-sounding word. I'm curious to find out in today's session how satisfaction is a superpower. Yeah, delighted to be here, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. We have a little respite in our day on Friday to step over into the weekend. And we'll use this session today to hit some points that may be practical, something you can use to feel this superpower. It's already within us. It's a matter of recognizing a few perspectives that can be helpful, and then also practicing. It sounds also a little counterintuitive, doesn't it, JM, that you would practice satisfaction? Because it seems like you either have it or you don't in one perspective. So
Yeah.
everyone okay? Yeah. What do you think, JM?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like by practice, it means you can develop the power of satisfaction. And that was intriguing. Unlike, say, satisfaction, which, as I said, maybe you're inherently born with it, that you're always content or not. So, yeah.
One of the ways to look at it is that a car has an innate ability to run, otherwise it's not really much of a car. But sometimes it stalls. And at least in the old days, I don't know about nowadays, but it used to happen that when a car would stall, there was a method for getting it started again. And several of us would jump out, get behind the car, and start pushing it. And the driver would keep the clutch pushed in, that is non-engaged, this pedal was pushed. And then at a certain point, when we got enough speed, the driver would pull out the clutch and then the car boom, boom, boom would start again. And I'm not sure if that relates to modern cars, but in the old days, that's how it used to go, kids. And the car would then start up again and it would have enough juice to keep going for a long time. So one way that the teachers of this system of yoga talk about is that we do have these innate superpowers, and one of them is satisfaction. And it's a matter of getting a little bit of momentum by understanding what it means and then observing that we are enough, no matter where we are, what situation we're in. It can get us started in the right direction. It meaning this kind of discussion that we're going to have today. At least that's my hope. So everybody, let's take a moment, because we may have been moving around doing lots of things, just to be consciously aware. And today I was practicing during my meditation sessions in the morning of the principle simplicity that we talked about before. It's a simple act just to notice our own consciousness. It doesn't require much thinking. It just requires awareness, and awareness is very simple. And so let's try that just for a moment now. If you'd like to participate, just get a comfortable place wherever you are, and maybe sit up a little straighter than you were a second ago. Don't overstrain, but just make sure you're in a balanced posture. And try closing your eyes. And I'm going to turn on my original sound from musicians and a little bit of music. Take a moment to breathe. And as you're breathing, notice that you can bring your attention to your breath. And just relax, but keep an alert mind. And keep it simple. Just notice that you're breathing. Don't worry about how you're breathing or why. Just notice that you are. Simple way to approach life is not worry about what should be, but just worry about what is right now. There's a sense of simple satisfaction in the present moment. And the reason, says the Bhagavad Gita, is that we always exist. And the only reason that I feel dissatisfaction is I forget that. How do I forget it? The things around me are coming and going. My life situation is always changing. And when I identify myself as my life situation, rather than noticing that I'm the one watching my life situation, then as things change, I feel I'm changing, I feel threatened, I feel afraid, and I scramble to find satisfaction by reconstructing what I thought I had, but it never quite fits. So now's an opportunity to just be for a moment without trying to reconstruct anything. Any thought energy, let it be cloud-like and float away or disintegrate. And now back up an inch in your mind and notice that you're aware. Just notice it again and again that you're aware. And then awareness is something supernatural. And take a couple of more breaths. Transfer your attention back to your breathing. Feel a little gratitude for the fact that you can breathe. And notice that you can leap from this position back into the external world, and there's a difference. By slowly opening your eyes, bring your focus back to the Zoom room, and you just transferred from one realm to the next. Welcome back. Now, I'll give a few practical points in a moment. First, I'm going to go into the etymology of the word satisfaction. And maybe, JM, you can bring up the first slide for me. Let's take a look and see what we've got. So, the question is, do you have enough? And I did a little homework before we got on today. and started looking at the word enough. It comes from Old English. It's a determiner. It's the part of speech it is. Just like the or every. And in its role as a determiner, it means as much as required. So that led me to another investigation. What does require mean? What do we require? And it's an adverb, and it means sufficiently for the purpose. And it also comes from the re, which some etymologists say means repeatedly, and quaerere, from Latin, which means to ask or seek. So the question then comes, how much do you need to ask for to be satisfied? Satisfied means you require something, and then how much do you require? Well, let's just talk about that for a moment, because that's not an original idea. Lots of people have thought about that. One of the famous researchers, not ready yet, is Maslow. Maslow talked about the fact that, and I'll just say it in terms of the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the wisdom literatures that tells us that we have a dual existence in this world. We have a material body and mind. The body is mechanical. You can look at it for yourself. It's a little striking when you actually observe your body as a machine. You can see that definitely with the physical part. There's levers and pulleys and pumps, right? And then you might look a little bit at the subtle body, which the Bhagavad Gita says is the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. Subtle elements, like software. So we have those, and again, surprisingly, these are described, both of them, both the body and the mind are described as being lower energy. Although the subtle body is much more refined or subtle than the gross material body. So there's these aspects of our existence. We're cloaked in these, says the Bhagavad Gita, but who are we? We're the awareness, and we just experience that. The eye doesn't see, but we see through the eye. So we have a body, we're not the body. We have a mind, we're not the mind. We are the conscious being within. It's good to know. If you accept the theory, you can try it out for yourself. Try it on for size, see how it fits for you. Now, going back to what's required, what do you have to ask for? So Maslow, who talked about the hierarchy of needs, gives these gradations. He says we have our physiological needs, for instance, food, water, clothing, sleep, shelter, he mentions. Physiological needs. Then he talks about we have needs for safety and security, health, employment, property, social abilities. And then next we have, it's getting more subtle, right? He goes up on this pyramid and he says love and belonging, friendship, family, intimacy, sense of connection. Then above that, he places self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, the need to be a unique individual. And then on the top, he puts self-actualization, morality, creativity, spontaneity, acceptance. And if we were to look at it in the context of, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita, this idea of self-actualization is extremely important. Otherwise, we can miss the point. Well, how do we miss the point? The body and mind are vehicles. They're meant to take us somewhere specific. It's not random. It's not by chance. But they're specifically equipped to take us to a state of consciousness. We can develop it while we're in the human body, where we can become freed from the bonds of the material world. This is called moksha. Become freed from the bondage of the material world. What's that? It's described that we have to undergo so many troublesome changes while we're in a material body. But when we're able to realize our spiritual existence, then we're not obligated to keep a material body. Now, that sounds less practical and more philosophical, and we can go into that a little more deeply in a moment. But I just wanted to point to the fact that there is a hierarchy of needs, and this means that we have to maintain our body and mind, but we also have to have a higher purpose in order to feel satisfied. This is also one of the statements given in the ancient wisdom literature called the Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, the highest dharma for all humans is to develop a sense of purpose, spiritual purpose. Otherwise, if we don't have that, then we just struggle with maintaining ourselves in the lower rungs of the hierarchy of needs. So, as we're wrangling with that, there's a sense of trying to get to a point of satisfaction or peace of mind, and it's slightly elusive. So, I want to go back to this point of enough and how we can practice it. Let's look at a couple more slides because we'll go to a meaningful place that I discovered somewhere in Northern California. And that is this stream. And actually, this is a stock photo. It's not an actual picture of the stream, but it gives you an idea. I found a botanical garden in Northern California, and I was walking through it, and there's a quaint wooden bridge that stretches over the stream. And on it, there's a little placard that says, "No coins needed to operate stream." And I like the humor of it. They didn't want people throwing coins in the water. It actually interferes with the navigation system of the fish who live there. And I thought it was a gentle way to say it. Speak of funny. But I wrote it in my notebook because it reminded me that there's a way in which I'm always trying to find something to patch what's missing in my life. But going back to the admonition on the placard, no coins necessary to operate stream, we already have a stream of satisfaction or a stream of consciousness, which when we look at carefully gives us a sense of being and feeling satisfied. We don't need any extra. There's not a lot extra we need, other than a few hierarchy of needs to hold us in place. And the Bhagavad Gita does admit that yes, you have to be healthy. So does Srimad Bhagavatam, the other ancient wisdom literature I quoted, said, no, you have to have enough in your life to be healthy. But why? So that you can inquire and you can notice your self beyond the body and mind. And if you only try to acquire so that you can be healthy physically, you won't be satisfied, because there's a certain point at which you won't be healthy and you'll have to leave your body. So there's this, you found the original picture. That's it. I took a photo of that. No coins necessary to operate creek. So it relates to us. We don't need a lot of extra things if we practice satisfaction, our superpower. Okay, let me say a few things about that, and hopefully it can spark a little discussion. Because as most of you know, we have discussion here. So one of the ways that's practical, we can notice what we actually need and not try to overcompensate by getting material things to satisfy that urge for satisfaction, is to watch nature. There's a way in which nature takes its course. And in fact, there's another ancient script that talks about watching the birds. If you watch the birds in the field and notice how they have really keen intelligence, a lot of birds have intelligence, but many of them are extremely smart. But beyond being smart, there's a natural way in which they're given their needs. I've noticed that birds have not much problem building a nest. They just find a few pieces of string and leaves and branches, and they put it together. And then their food is naturally available too. Some of them eat berries, others of them eat bugs or fish, but it's naturally there. And this is something that the ancient Upanishad, called the Shriya Upanishad, says that we can observe about the world and about ourselves. Did you realize you have a self-healing body? Did you ever take a moment to notice that? If you burn yourself, cut yourself, stub a toe, whatever it might be, then what do? You just try to facilitate it healing and give it a little time. It heals itself. It's sort of magic. I think years ago, in the movie E.T., the extraterrestrial, the E.T. would touch someone and they would heal, and everyone thought, oh, that's amazing. It's like, well, did you notice that that's what your body does anyway? It just heals itself if you give it a chance in most cases. And similarly, if you look at the world and you notice the cyclical way that the world works, there's water pulled out of the ocean, made into clouds, it gets distributed across the land. And there's a high premium put on living more in harmony with nature in the ancient Vedas, because there's also a way that we can be out of harmony with nature and disturb the environment in such a way that we don't get what we need. Yeah, thanks, JM. The world's in balance. There's a way that when we notice that balance in our own bodies and in nature itself, we can have this sense of satisfaction. And here's one of the practices that's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, if anybody's feeling courageous and wants to try it. Yeah, come back into the Zoom room just for a second. And that is, it's called Yadricha. Everyone try saying this word behind muted mics. Yadricha. Yadricha. It's a Sanskrit word, and it's one of my favorites, and it refers to that which comes of its own accord. You didn't ask for it. I mean, you might have needed it, but you didn't ask for it specifically, and it just came to you. Has anybody ever gotten something they needed, or does it happen to you regularly, that you didn't ask for? You didn't have to work hard for it. It just came of its own accord. Okay, only one person raised her hand. Kennedy's the only recipient. Shankari Kaur, Rajmohan. Okay, a few of us. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, the teacher, Krishna, says, if you want to try this, you can practice satisfaction. And here's a challenge for you. You can try it for a day or a few days or a week or a month. And you may notice, okay, I'll complete this, Bridget, and then I am excited to call on you. Yadricha labha. Labha means gain. Santushto. Tushta means to be satisfied, and santushto means to be completely satisfied. Try this. Be satisfied. Practice being satisfied with whatever comes to you unsought. You didn't chase it. You didn't have to go online. You didn't have to go to the mall. Whatever it is, you just be satisfied with what we have now, and whatever comes to you, you just be satisfied with that. Bridget.
No question, no question. It was just answering your question. Just slow.
Well, that makes a big difference to me. You've had that experience?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, this is one of the uh, actual practices of yoga or connecting with the complete whole. The complete whole, as it's said in the Sri Upanishad, is a natural way of balancing everything. It's called Purnam, completeness. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purna Udachate. Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vishishate. An old Sanskrit verse, and it's pointing to everything and saying, look, everything's in balance. Even the things that seem out of balance, they're out of balance for a reason. And they're in the process of coming back into balance. So one of the practices, a personal practice, is yadrisha labasantushto. Try being satisfied with gain that comes of its own accord. Now the opposite to that is I can have a sense that too much is not enough. Whatever I get, it's not enough. What if something comes to me, I can always look at it and say, well, that's not good enough. Right? There's a choice to make. It's not good enough. But one of the other points that Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita is no matter what you get in this world that's material, it's a lower energy, you'll never be satisfied with it completely because we're more subtle than matter as conscious entities. And the more subtle entity cannot appreciate things that are grosser than itself. We can appreciate it from one perspective, but it doesn't completely satisfy us. We need a higher connection, a connection to that which is of the same subtle nature as ourselves. And it doesn't come from matter. And one more term before I open it up for everyone making comments, and please, no stampedes, is a word that is common in Japanese, itadaku. Itadakimasu is something when families sit down for a meal. Everyone says itadakimasu, and the verb means to accept. There's a sense in the kanji, the pictograph, Chinese pictograph, there are three alphabets in Japanese, and one of them is borrowed from Chinese. And it has this sense of placing something on your head as if it was a gift. It's coming to you. Itadaku, itadakimasu. So when you sit down for food, this is their way of saying, as we say, grace. Grace descends, it comes down to us. And so here's this food, where did it come from? Well, that's a good question. You put a little seed in the ground, you put some water, then it grows by the power of the sun and it comes out. It's a little mind-blowing if you really think about it. And then it's there for us. Itadaku, we're receiving. So this is a kind of way of living in satisfaction, practicing satisfaction, accepting those things that come to us as gifts. They're coming down to us. And also practicing that the sense that whatever comes to me, that's enough. I'm going to be satisfied with that. You can use that one word, enough. Now we'll take a few reflections. Anything you've heard so far, any concept that sounded interesting, practical, or that you utterly object to and you'd like to complain? Several categories available.
Could I say something?
Absolutely, please.
Haribol? I mean,
Yes.
I was just gonna say, your talk reminded me of a staff meeting at work the other day. They handed out little tickets, and at the end they give prizes, usually money and gift certificates, and I never win. And the other day they were like saying, oh, these people, this for a $25 gift certificate on Amazon. And then the next person won 50, and the next person won 50. And then they called my number out for 100. And I was like, awesome, I never win. And then like a minute later, they called out a number for 300 and then 500 and then 1,000. And then I was like, ah, like I got unsatisfied. But
It's
I
very
tried
easy.
not to be. I tried to be grateful.
Yeah, but it's such a nice point you make, because it's when it's based on a sense of lacking something or trying to fill a hole, then there's never enough zeros on it. You may have had this experience that if somebody gives you some money, then or it's promised to you, you could already spend it in your head before you get it. Like so you're going to inherit something, and what are you going to get? Oh, you're going to get 300,000, and then within 2 seconds, your mind can say, "Yeah, but that's already spent. I have my student loan. I got to pay off the mortgage. It's gone. Actually, I'm in debt." And even if uh, many people have proved, at least anecdotally, that no matter how many zeros you put on, you can still feel unsatisfied when it comes to a quantity of something. And you've just proved it anecdotally also. Thank you very much, Subhadra. We have Shankari.
I was
Thank
just
you.
thinking, I was just thinking that this not being satisfied with things can actually become very chronic. People who've practiced it over a long period of time, because I know this person, whenever they come to my place, they're always, "Oh, your fridge is so small. I wish it was a little bigger. We could accommodate more things. Oh, you don't have enough closets in your house. Oh, you don't have enough store." Seems like, and you know, whatever they bring in, I'm always able to put them in. It just requires a little space management. And then say, "Oh, you know, I never realized." But every time they come, they start with that. So it just shows me that they probably have something big lacking in their heart, and that kind of reflects to three small little things in their lives that they just find, "Oh, this could be better, that could be better." I've seen the same people who go to the mall, they pick things after so many hours of putting their effort into it. They'll come back and say, "Oh, I don't like it. Can you please take me back again? I want it." So I just feel that it just becomes chronic over a period of time. And just reminds me again what Ishopanishad said, that every incompleteness is experienced due to the incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. So that God-shaped hole in the heart, unless that is filled, this chronic disease will come to harm them over and over again. So just wanted to share that.
Yes, a very nice point that it can become exacerbated. If we don't practice satisfaction, there's no limit to how much dissatisfaction we can feel. Really nice point. Lijay.
Hare Krishna, Shishika Prabhu, thanks so much for a wonderful knowledge session again today. I was thinking about satisfaction and appreciation. And I remember you talked about appreciate whatever comes to your life. And I realize a lot of times when we say we really appreciate whatever, it's usually associated with something positive. So, for example, I appreciate my friends doing this for me, or I appreciate my parents because they did all these wonderful things. But very rarely, at least for me, I appreciate any hardship in my life. But I think deeper, that is because I consider things either good or bad from my own perspective. But if we really think about, there is nothing good or bad, because good can lead to bad and bad can lead to good. We really appreciate everything that comes to us. So I just want to add to what you said about satisfaction and deeper logic about appreciation you previously taught us. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, that's such a nice point, Lijay. And if we change the context and our purpose is different, then we may look at the world differently and whatever comes to us differently. And we can change contexts. For instance, sometimes in sales, someone will say like, "Oh, I don't like getting rejected," and so many people are saying no, and say, then you can teach people. You say, "Okay, then change your objective. Try to get 10 people or 20 people in a row to tell you no. It's just a context changer. Your goal is not to sell anything today. Your goal is to try to get 20 people in a row to tell you no. And once people, the person who's learning the technique would then take it up and say, oh, that's what my goal is? I'll try for it. And I've actually experimented with this in various projects and had people come back ecstatic after 7, and they say, oh, I came to 7, I still have 13 more to go. And when we have a way of changing context, for instance, in the context, in the way you were speaking about good, bad, how do we interpret it, the way the Srimad Bhagavatam describes our place in the universe is it's schoolhouse. If I take it as a place of learning, and whatever happened to me is meant for me to take a lesson. In fact, I saw that on the front page of one of the daily newspapers that comes out here in San Mateo County, and it was a teacher teaching driver education, and he said, forget the mistake, remember the lesson. And there's that perspective that can lead to satisfaction even when there's seeming reversals, that, oh, wow, there must be a big lesson behind this. And it's a quintessential attitude that liberates one from the tyranny of the mind, saying that this is good and this is bad, which is, there's a term for that. It's called mano-dharma, the religion of the mind. The religion of the mind is to accept and reject. And it makes its own interpretation according to our context, and our context generally comes from our culture or our family. Say, this is good, that is bad. For one person, eating a certain thing is bad. For another person, it's good. Some people like a particular social setting, and other people think it's horrible. So the mind goes back and forth constantly. It's never steady, and it has its own religion. So there's a way to rise above that, says the Bhagavad Gita, and come to this much broader perspective. Nice points. I wanted to say to Shankari Kaur that I met a monk once. I noticed him several times because he was traveling some of the same routes that I was, and our paths crossed several times. And I noticed something particular in traveling, that he didn't have anything. Maybe a tiny little cloth bag about this big. That was all his possessions. So I made an appointment to speak to him. And I wanted to know, do you have anything? He said, no, I don't have much. All I have is this. I said, how do you live like that? How do you travel like that? And he told me something very interesting. He said it took 20 years. Now, disclaimer, I'm not advocating getting rid of everything, because that's not actually the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. The philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is to use everything for a higher purpose. So whether you have a lot or you have a little is not the point. But there is this point that we may not need as much as we think we do. So he talked about how every time he would take a trip, and he traveled a lot as a monk, he would do inventory and he'd say, which things didn't I really need last time? What things could I have gotten very easily or already supplied in the environments I'm going to? And then he systematically would eliminate. It's always a little bit of a risk. It seems like, well, what if I don't have it when I get there and I feel inconvenience? Don't you hate inconvenience? I do. So each time he would take something out. And one by one, he'd take things out, and then he realized after some time that he was still okay, still okay, still okay. And he got down to this very sparse little parcel that he carried with him. Even the cloth that he wore was very simple. He had a set of cloth that he would wear, and one that he would wear around his shoulders, and then he'd switch them out. And he could wash one of them in a bucket and hang it, and in the morning it would be dry, and then he'd switch it out. And so everything he learned wasn't as important as he thought it was. And he learned to be satisfied with very little. So that's something that seems counterintuitive nowadays, because there's a sense through advertising that there are so many things you have to have. And my teacher used to call them unnecessary necessities. Let's see a couple more slides, JM. Remember, we're talking about satisfaction. And the next is that your content equals your contentment. And there's a sense of the whatever we take in will reverberate within us. So what we listen to can stimulate a sense that we don't have enough, or the opposite. What we listen to, we read, we see, whom we associate with will make a big difference. And so the Bhagavad Gita recommends that we refine our listening, our reading, our seeing, and our association. You may notice that there's a commodity called news. And there's also advertising. And there's a sense to it that it's creating a sense in us that we don't have enough. At least advertising. Unless you have this, you're not complete. And there's also a kind of agitation of the mind that I'll talk about in just a minute that we can get from listening to certain things. So we have to be careful and choose those things that fill us up with knowledge that gives us a higher context. Okay, let's see the next one. Here are a few ways in which we can tame the mind and make it more satisfied. These are practical. And that is focus on actions, not on outcomes. This is one of the ways that Krishna talks in the Bhagavad Gita about working in the world. Don't be so concerned with the outcome. Just focus on how you're doing it. Not what you're doing, but how you're doing it. You may find yourself in a particular place, in a particular job, or doing a task that is not the main point. The main point is how you do it. So the mood in which you do something is important. So doing selfless service instead of reward-seeking work leads to satisfaction. This is one of the algebraic formulas given in the ancient wisdom literatures. I put it in red, so if you want to do a tattoo, you can use that part. The next one is let go of worrying about what is not in your control. We've heard that one so many times, but if you actually practice it, you'll notice the worry energy comes in, but then you can select which thoughts you want to focus on. And of course, Stephen Covey famously pointed out that if you focus on your circle of influence, that which you can do something about, and not on your circle of concern, then you're keeping your mind in a more satisfied state, because when you pull back to the circle of influence, then you feel useful. You have a purpose. And the next has a lot to do with relationships. See if you can relate to this. Work on yourself instead of trying to change others. I can't make people change, but if I change, they may change, is another way of looking at it. And another way of looking at it is, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. But oftentimes, dissatisfaction comes in relationships when we think, why doesn't this person change? Well, why don't you just change? That's a more reasonable prospect, don't you think, JM? So here are some more highly recommended practices for satisfaction. And they come right from the Bhagavad Gita. One of them is to divert your mind away from sense gratification and point it toward hearing wisdom literatures like the Bhagavad Gita is one I recommend. In fact, I'm memorizing certain parts of it as a challenge. And I just find that being absorbed in higher minded literature is a way that the mind starts to feel satisfied. If you read low minded literature or literature that's specifically meant just to appeal to the senses, instead of pointing to your metaphysical nature, like the Bhagavad Gita does as an example, then you may not feel so satisfied. The next is chanting and hearing spiritual vibration. Mantra meditation is a sure way to tame the mind and its tendency to search out sense gratification. There is a way the mind can come into resonance with a higher vibration, and that's called mantra meditation. And surprisingly, not so surprisingly actually, this is not surprising, is it? Doing good for others. Even just thinking about it right now, do you find yourself, if you start thinking, what does he mean by doing good for others? And you think, oh, how could I do good for others? As soon as you start thinking about how doing good for others, the mind becomes satisfied. But if you turn it around and think, how can I serve myself better? And why aren't people doing more for me? That's a sure way to feel dissatisfied. Why aren't they moving fast enough? Why don't they remember me? Why don't they give me more? And so forth. But if you think about how to do good for others, now of course there are ways in which in our social interactions, obviously there are caveats. I'm not advocating, and I always have to give this disclaimer that you should let people abuse you, and that if you need a raise, you don't ask for, that you just like, I don't ask for a raise because I don't ask for anything. But in general, the principle of service and thinking how to do good for others makes us feel satisfied. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I'm being challenged here on the chat box. Let's have some challenges now.
So one is Vicky shared from your previous class of yours. The more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes.
That's a change of context, right? We can always change the context and say what's our goal in life. And if you feel that you're being beat up by your mind and feeling dissatisfied, try to change the goal in general. And that's one of the points that the Bhagavatam's making. You got your goal all wrong. You're chasing something that'll never lead to satisfaction. Just it's a hydra. The more you pursue it, the more desires you'll have. In fact, in the wisdom literatures, it's mentioned that kama means material desire. Sometimes it's translated as lust. And here's the definition. A material desire, are you all ready for it? I'm not convinced. Okay. Because Mayank gave such an emphatic head nod, I'm going to say it. A material desire is a desire you can never fulfill. You can never be satisfied. You can't ever reach it. So the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bhogaishvaryai prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam. That if you try to chase material desires, he says, get ready because you'll never be satisfied. It's not possible. It's not possible. Good to start with that knowledge. Okay, go ahead, JM.
And Sundar has a question. He says, focus on actions, not on outcomes, is a nice point. Also clarifying why you are doing a certain action beyond the immediate reward is also helpful. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, focusing on actions, not on outcomes, as a nice point that I notice myself that if I'm so focused on the outcome that it seems that my task is onerous. For instance, on my desk right here, I have a little placard. I've had this for years for writing. And here it says, I cut this out of somewhere, or I made a copy and put it in this little frame. It says, a book writing tip by Vicky Hitkus. It says, if you want to write a nonfiction book, don't focus on, quote unquote, writing a book. Instead, focus on 1, gathering information, 2, creating fresh ideas, 3, organizing your material, 4, dividing the material into chapters. You won't feel intimidated, and your book will seem more doable, she says. I like that. Makes me peaceful and satisfied because I can't write a book, but I can gather some information. It's possible for me to create fresh ideas. In fact, I'm always looking for them. I have my pen and my little pad wherever I go, and it was like, come on, give me a good idea now. Just waiting for it. And so, yeah, that's a focusing on actions instead of outcomes. It's a very helpful way to feel more satisfied and engaged. And then you said clarifying why you're doing so. That's so important, Sundar. Thanks for bringing it up. If you have a why behind doing it, and you can make it clear to yourself why you're doing it, then you don't get lost in the morass of activities that are going on in the world. And in fact, prioritizing what's most important gives us so much energy. If you make a list of your priorities and you can keep coming back to it, it saves you from getting lost in the myriad causes that get piled on you every day, because from every direction, someone's going to tell you you have to do this to fit in, or if you don't do that, then you're going to be an outcast and so forth. But you, as a human, get to decide what your priorities are and then stick to them. Okay, JM, go ahead.
We have OM who says, say we practice all the things we discuss here and do selfless work. In spite of this, what if others don't appreciate, rather criticize your work? How should one handle this?
Wow, what a great question. Who here likes getting criticized? Yay, bring it on. It's one of the hardest things to handle. And one of the teachers of Bhakti from 500 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, gave this special verse. He said it's so special in spiritual practice and it's universal that the several points made in it you should make into a necklace and wear it around your neck. I suppose you can make a bracelet also. But whatever way you can imbibe these 3 points. He talked about being humble. That is being open to the fact that maybe you don't know everything. As there's 4 words that block all learning, and that is, I already know that. And the next one is to give respect to others. That's possible. You could come to that point. Find a way to respect others. But then comes the hardest one. And that is, don't expect any respect in return. And he said, if you can practice that, these 3 things, and you keep doing that over and over again, then you can come to a point of self-realization. It's such a universal, simple process. But your question is, let's see what it is actually. How should one handle this? Well, first of all, try this. See what it feels like to tolerate criticism, and just notice that you can rise above it. It doesn't mean just because somebody criticizes you that you have to defend yourself. I mean, in some cases you may have to. And also, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world either. In fact, there's a mantra you can use, which is, I live to be corrected. I heard it on a radio interview once, and I said, I'm keeping that one. Because if you keep it close at hand and the ego responds, like, how can you criticize me? Like, some people will criticize one another while they're driving. Somebody will just give a sign to somebody else, or a glance that, you don't know how to drive. And then the other person goes crazy. So you don't even know each other. What does it matter? but if you're just a little sober and you try to tolerate criticism that comes from others, or even take it on and say, okay, I'll try to be better, you don't have this sense of resistance where there's a collision between your ego and the person's criticism that they've given you if you just take it. And like I heard that on that radio interview, the person was slightly criticized. And then he was such a high-minded person. He says, okay, yeah, I live to be corrected. Thanks a lot. And there was no friction. He just kept going. And everyone listening, at least I know for myself, I thought, wow, this person is evolved. This person has a higher consciousness. So you can practice that and see how it works for you. That's how you can handle it. Is just notice that I'm still alive. I'm still okay. It didn't kill me. Somebody criticizing me. And if others don't appreciate, like, you might have kids, right? Somebody might have kids, children, and you raise them, and you do everything for them, and then through their teens, they might even say, like, oh, you never did anything for me. I shudder to think whatever I told my parents at a certain point after they sacrificed so much for me. But later on, when I became more mature, I just realized how amazing they were. And I went back and I spent time with them, and I told them I saw them as different kinds of entities when I was more mature, and I had learned to become independent from them and then become interdependent with them later. So oftentimes when people don't appreciate you, they may appreciate you later. A lot of artists, for instance, are never appreciated when they're creating their art, but when they die, everyone loves them. It's weird, right? JM, what do you got for us? What did we win? Any parting gifts?
Those are the thoughts on the chat board. Please feel free to unmute and go ahead, Vicky.
I really like that point in the very beginning, that we have a tendency to continuously reorganize what we have. And it gave me a really funny visual where someone, our ever well-wisher, is always watching, and they see the spirit soul, the little jiva, continuously reorganizing and not realizing the bigger picture, life after life. And they're just waiting for us to turn around to them and realize that we don't have to reorganize these things anymore. And when we do, we end up in another body that accommodates what we wanted to reorganize. And in a way, when you said no coins needed to operate stream, I thought of a stream of consciousness. And in a way, sometimes I wish I could put a coin in to stop that stream of consciousness, the thoughts, especially at nighttime to go to sleep. But if we continuously put in these coins to operate, in a way, it can be that the material things that we put in start to use us rather than the other way around. And I really like the point of itadakimasu as well. A sensei once told me that it means thank you for your life. And that really changed my perspective on everything. All of the living entities that went into even transporting and getting the food onto the plate. And last night during Bhakti Circle, in our small discussion, Priyanka brought up that satisfaction is a stepping stone. And I really like that because it's not an end-all be-all, but what's next? And it allows you to focus more on the journey as the important thing, not the result. And years ago, I wanted to trace back my family's roots, and I really liked the idea of Ramadan. So I put together for myself a little list called Ramadan resolutions for the spiritual skeptic. And one quote I put on there was, "Today I arm myself with coffee and the willingness to be wrong." And I just really like that idea. I arm myself with the willingness to be wrong.
That's really powerful. Yeah. Jam, I think we have to call it there because we're over. And this is a professional show, so we have to be on time, unlike some of our other shows. Sorry, Shankari Kaur. Please hold the thought. write it down and share it with us later. JM, thank you very much for keeping the lights on. Thanks everybody who joined today from various places, taking a little time, a lot of time out of your busy schedules. It's very meaningful to me that you showed up. It makes my whole day, week, month, year, life. And there's a very important aspect to these teachings, and that is serving others. And one of the ways to serve others, and I just experienced it this morning, is just to reach out and encourage somebody. It comes from the root word core, which means the heart. Our hearts get affected by the world. We feel dissatisfied. So a way to feel satisfied is to try to encourage other people. Find something good in them and then say, hey, you're doing okay. Everybody needs it. It doesn't matter how high up you think the person is. So you take a little homework, everyone? Okay, so there's a way to say goodbye and encourage each other at the same time. It's an ancient saying. It means keep the transcendental vibration going, and it means goes Haribol. Haribol.
Haribo!
Haribo!
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.